Hello, everyone. Welcome to another great panel from Console Room 2025, rocking through the universe. Today, we are rocking all the way through season 22 of classic Doctor Who. And there's a lot of things to say about that season. And I have some people that are going to say stuff about it with me. So I'd like our esteemed group of panelists to introduce themselves and say hello. We can start with
Hello.
Chris.
Yeah, hello. Hi. My name's Chris Hawton. Folks that were at the convention physically last year might remember me as the strange, small British man that was not Sylvester McCoy. I very much enjoyed Colin Baker's time. And Time Lash was a birthday treat for me. So I am looking forward to discussing season 22 with you all. Kathryn.
I'm Kathryn Sullivan. I write review essays that Rob has also appeared in. Outside In Regenerates. I've also been in Turn of Time, Companions of Doctor Who. I have some of the books down with me in the marketplace. And Rob.
Hi, yeah, I'm Rob Levy. I am in those two books that Kathryn mentioned, and I also am in their Millennium one and the forthcoming Deep Space Nine one that is coming in as well. So that's a couple things. And then I do panels for this convention. In the past, I've done them for Chicago TARDIS, and I do panels for DragonCon every year as well. So thank you for all being on the panel. I guess we'll jump in. And since Chris kickstarted everything, we'll put Kathryn on the spot first. So we're talking about season 22.
Yes.
Let's just begin with each of us doing our overall thoughts of Colin Baker season 2, or Colin Baker season 1, season 22.
Yeah. Well, we'd already seen Twin Dilemma, so we were looking forward to seeing what he was going to be doing in the new season. It was more of, back in the time period, because I was growing up and watching it, well, time delay because it took a while to get over to America. It was very colorful because 80s were very colorful, bright colors, and being much more gritty in style than we really expected. And I've got some interviews about this that I can talk about. But just overall view, it was nice to see the companion actually got to wear different costumes versus poor Tegan and Nissa basically stuck in the same costume all the time. It was just a different approach to writing, and the fact that the Doctor and Peri were not getting along at the very beginning, and it seemed like it was taking forever for them to work out who they were. But on the whole, though, I still like that season.
For me, I discovered season 22 in a fairly kind of like piecemeal way. I the very first bit of season 22 I saw was Time Lash, which was given to me as on a video as a birthday present by my family. I still am going through therapy, yeah, I then a few years later watched Revelation of the Daleks. I think that's right R word. It is right R word. And then did watch the rest of them. But yeah, I think it's as you say, it is more violent, but I do think there are things that, like Attack of the Cybermen, that's a good season opener. Vengeance on Varos is quite prescient. I mean, to the point that it almost predicted bits of Colin Baker's own career, because he went on to be on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, which is kind of like Vengeance on Varos writ large. So yeah. And also there are stories like Mark of Durrani that could easily fit into, I think, any other Doctor's tenure. And also I think Revelation of the Daleks is hilarious, and it's quite macabre. It doesn't have maybe necessarily as much Dalek in as you might think, but I do think and that is also visually striking. You've got the transparent Dalek, you've got kind of a winter scene in the snow And okay, sure, that's just pure good luck, but it just looks so wonderful. Like the Doctor in his blue cloak, and like the colors are popping and everything. But yeah, I do think it is better than kind of like people might think. And but I also do think that a lot of the reasons why it gets a bit of a kicking is because Michael Grade tried to cancel it.
So let's
Yeah,
we'll get to that all in a second.
yeah, sure.
So for me, this is one of my favorite seasons of classic Doctor Who. And I think a lot of it's based on nostalgia. Kathryn will remember this, but I remember before Colin Baker was a doctor, we saw the press photos of him holding up the outfit, and we're like, "What is this?" And we just knew that that it was going to be like weird and strange. Then we saw Twin Dilemma, and we were like, "Okay." We all, at that point, we learned that the first story is not always what the Doctor's going to be like, right?
Yeah.
So we were all really looking forward to the next season, just because it was such. So I mean, we didn't have spoilers, we didn't have anything with the internet, right? It was all Doctor Who magazine and what people heard at cons, and so the word of mouth on this was really great, and I was excited. I'm like, oh, they're opening with a Cyberman story, right? And there are flaws with a lot of things in this season, which I'm sure we'll get to, but I just sort of like some of the things they did with it, some of the things I don't like, but there's a lot of it does a lot of nostalgia things for me that I really liked, and I think that's part of the reason I like it. I'll jump in. We'll start with Attack of the Cybermen, which is one of my favorite Doctor Who stories. Despite the fact that they didn't really explain the who, what, where, or why of Lytton, and they spoilers, they kill off Lytton, who they could have made a really fascinating and interesting character later, right? They did a lot of that in this season of getting rid of really interesting side characters. And despite the fact that there are some obvious plot things, I just loved how dark it was. I love the nod going back to the Troughton era and Tomb of the Cybermen. I love the fact that we got, the Cryons are probably the first really interesting new race they'd introduced in a while that I thought were kind of interesting. And I didn't care. I thought they worked, even though the makeup and everything was really stupid. But I still thought that they were really believable and they worked. And I loved how it just set a tone. It had a very somber and very sort of dark tone to it, even though this is 80s Doctor Who, right? And one of the problems I think you have when you look at season 22 is you look at season 21, which is very similar in that the stories are kind of half good, half bad, whatever, but you're coming off Caves of Androzani, you're coming off Planet of Fire, and you're coming off another great Dalek story, right? So it's really hard to follow that up with what people that watch the Peter Davison era. Any of those three stories, people could argue that those are in his top 5 or 10 stories, right? So it's got a lot going against it. It's got the new Doctor syndrome. It's got the future of the series hanging in doubt, and then you've got the fact that there are at least 3 amazing stories in the season before it that really popped. So that's where we are when we start Attack of the Cybermen. So you guys can pick up from there and tell us your thoughts on it.
I mean, I very much enjoyed the playfulness of like the start of Attack of the Cybermen, the fact that you have the chameleon circuit working, and they're kind of like going, right, well, let's just have some fun with the TARDIS. And yeah, and okay, sure, going back to kind of Tosser's Lane is very much kind of fan service, but it is fun. I don't think you need to have watched Tomb of the Cybermen to have understood the story. I don't think.
And the Halley's Comet bit was great.
Yes, yeah, and also at the time was very timely, because Halley's Comet was very much a thing. But I mean, I was thinking whilst I was prepping for this, that it's almost as if, like from a time point of view, it's almost as if like we made a sequel to Blink, and Blink wasn't available in the archives anymore. It's a similar amount of years between now and Blink as it was between Tomb of the Cybermen and Attack. And I think. A similar thing. You could probably do like a loose sequel to Blink, and they go, there you go, jobs are good. But yeah, no, I do think it's yeah, it's underrated. I mean, it's not a classic, but yeah, it's better than folks think. But yeah, Catherine.
I liked all the continuity references. The whole
Mm,
idea of it opens with Foreman's Yard, it's on Tatter's Lane, the mentions of Telos,
mm,
the little Sonic Lance. He's trying to
mm.
get a Sonic Screwdriver back, but it's not quite.
Yeah.
It was a little bit darker with the fact that the Doctor is killing people at the end, the Cyber Leader, the Cyber Controller.
Hmm.
Uh, but the whole idea of the Cryons and having female representation.
Mm,
And in the Doctor's Colin Baker years, which is behind the scenes, they interviewed the director of the show who said he suggested that they be female.
mm.
Okay. Uh, and he was also suggesting at the same time that, oh, Paula Moore didn't write it. It was actually Eric Sayward. Like, okay, I don't know. But all these little hints and that whole idea of, okay, a director outside is suggesting to the writer turning the Cryon female.
Mm.
And whoever came up with the idea, it was a great one because the whole idea of how they moved, how they spoke, you
Mhm.
actually felt like an alien race.
Mm.
And the
Yeah.
idea that, yes, Perry is freezing, give her warmer clothes in the middle of that
Yes.
episode.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. The other thing too is that
Yeah.
by 1985 when we're airing it, when we're watching this, right? Um, they've gotten filming down in quarries much better than they did in the 70s, where like it looks like they're on an actual alien planet and not the quarry of the month that you
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
got with Pertwee, which I thought was really interesting too. And I love it. I just think it's great.
Yeah.
And the fact that the Cryons had a vulnerability that was pretty obvious, like, they can't go outside. They're not going to Miami, right?
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting as well.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'll try to go on mute next time.
And that's fine. And the Cybermen were actually, I think for me, this may be the last time the Cybermen were really truly scary. And some of the ideas they touch upon later in Age of Steel and some of the other things where you see people turning into Cybermen. For 1985, that was pretty good. I mean,
Yeah.
they never really tapped into that completely as deeply as they did with this one. So I like that one, that little aspect of it as well.
Yeah, but you do also have random things like the return of the cyber leader or cyber controller from Tomb of the Cybermen,
Yeah.
and who has a slightly larger costume to accommodate for the fact that he is not as young or as slender as he used to be. But also, I mean, you could also say they would turn anybody into a Cyberman.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, which I thought was interesting too.
Yeah.
And then Vengeance on Varos, which
Mm.
I think is not only one of the best stories of the Colin Baker era, but I think it's a high mark of the series and one of the best stories of the 80s.
Mm.
Around this time is when we're starting to get the birth of reality TV. We've got like Kids Ask Your Parents. We've got like That's Incredible and Real People over here, and they've got some stuff over there in Britain as well.
Not as much.
But we're getting a lot of reality. The idea of reality TV is kind of beginning, right? And you're coming off of the year after 1984 actually happened. So this idea of like a surveillance state and a lot of dystopian stuff is really, really at a high mark being talked about in science fiction in 1985.
Yeah.
And Vengeance on Varos really plays on that. Like the idea of like, should we televise execution? Should we have criminals on TV? Do we want to have like real-time characters doing real-time things? And Vengeance on Varos is really, really, really dark. It's also, and Chris, if I am wrong on this, please tell me, it is also a stirringly powerful statement about Thatcherism.
Yes,
which I've had people mention.
Yeah, because you've got the people who are sitting at home watching things on television, and they've just been kind of like kept. Yeah, that basically they're just being distracted from their reality by kind of like watching things on the small screen. And certainly you have that as as a criticism. I mean, it's not quite as heavy-handed as, say, the Happiness Patrol, but clearly, the governor is a kind of like a corrupt figure, but he also has a slight air of kind of like British public school about him. You could imagine the governor being from Maggie's cabinet, quite easily. One thing I want to say about Vengeance on Varos is that I encountered it with episode 4. Yes, you heard me right, episode 4. I was at the time sort of in the Middle East, and we were watching it. And in the Middle East, they showed it in the kind of the in the 4 times 25-minute episode format that you got, I think, in America and in Australia and other places that decided not to want to go with the 45-minute thing that the BBC had done. And I was watching it in a hotel room with my brother. My brother was about 8 at the time, and he absolutely freaked out during episode 4. And he had to stand on the balcony because he was being so scared by kind of Nicola Bryant being turned into a bird. And because I hadn't seen episodes 1 through 3, I thought this was the best story ever because it starts with the Doctor being hung. I was trying to work out what on earth's going on, and I think in many ways this, and also seeing episode 3 of the Visitation in complete isolation in a different Middle Eastern city and trying to figure out what on earth was going on there, and encountering Adric for the first time, basically meant that I had a real appreciation of Quentin Tarantino and non-linear storytelling, because I was just able just to figure it out and run with it. And when I eventually watched Vengeance on Varos about 7 years later, I was slightly disappointed because I'd read the book in between. And so I was imagining these vast desert plains because there are scenes in the book where you kind of go through the desert. And I was imagining kind of like the acid bath as just being this kind of like hideous sort of like room. And it wasn't quite like that. However, Syl is a brilliant creation. Absolutely fantastic. And I can slightly see why, particularly in R2D2, they might be a bit reluctant to bring Syl back. I think they would want to make some changes to him so that it doesn't feel as if there's any kind of as if there's like an ableist view on Syl. But I would definitely love to see the Forest Beatons back in some shape or form. Yes, there ends my TED talk on Vengeance on Varos. Kathryn.
Well, I'm going to bring up some interviews from this
Cool.
video. They interviewed Philip Martin.
Yeah.
And he basically was doing it on the pros and cons of democracy, because the governor is basically stuck in the same voting idea. He had been doing other stage plays about politics, and JNT was very suspicious of this guy coming in wanting to write for the show. So he basically asked for a scene breakdown, which was really an insult to an established writer. But Martin wanted to go ahead, so he did it. And then JNT basically said, "Oh, all right, but tell him we can't put any politics in it." And he wrote it at a time where we had a writer's strike, we had an election, the American video market was coming in, and you were getting the video nasties of the time coming into television. He wasn't happy with the early afternoon viewing time. And the idea of creating Syl, he basically did this because he had been on set of another show, and a security officer was fussing about the fact that he was carrying a cup of coffee, and you have moisture all over the place. So he basically decided he was going to make sure about there was going to be a water tank and being moisturized, and also the humor of the malfunctioning voice box. They liked that. And he said Syl really amused him the way they actually did it, and the kids liked him.
Yeah.
So, because they basically had the costume so that people actually could see this was an alien. This was not cardboard figures or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other little tidbits I picked up elsewhere was the fact that Nicola Bryant developed a feather allergy after being in that costume for a while.
Hmm.
And the show aired opposite Robin Sherwood, which was before Jason became the lead actor on that show. But it's like,
Yes.
okay, you had this competition going on.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting stuff. And I think, it does say quite a lot about contemporary society, but also sort of like how society thinks and this concept of like conformity versus, there's a lot of stuff in there about justice, conformity, the role of the individual, what is entertainment. It is also Doctor Who kind of examining its own fate, kind of, in a way too. And I think it's just fabulous television. Let's jump into Mark of the Rani. And I'm going to start with Kathryn this time because it brings up an interesting thing I want to talk about with the season. Okay. Is that we saw the evolution of this in Attack of the Cybermen. You guys intimated it a little bit, and we see it manifest a little bit later with Jacqueline Pierce later in the season. But we get Kate O'Mara in this season as the Rani, and it's really a landmark in that you have several episodes where a strong female character or several female characters emerge in the story and aren't just like allocated to like 10 or 12 minutes of story time, right? It's and I think that's a really interesting moment for the show. And I think that while Mark of the Rani, for me, the worst thing about Mark of the Rani is that the Master is in it. I think just a flat out story with the Rani.
Oh, it would have been perfect.
It would have been much better. That's just my opinion. Having said that, it's nice to have him have more than one Time Lord of the Week, right? But I also think too that after Twin Dilemma having this many Time Lords around, it's like, guys, calm down. But I love the fact it's a historical story. We're getting back to kind of a historical story, and it's
actual historical figure.
And I knew nothing of this era as a historical era either. So like people in America are like, what is this?
What's this Levite thing?
Yeah, so that was interesting. But I think that, it is Doctor Who sort of reinventing the idea of the villain and the villain having, being a particular gender. I also think that the fact that the Rani is not a shrieking violet, the Rani is perhaps the most violent villain we've seen in quite some time, just in terms of callousness and disregard for things. But there are also, despite the fact that the Master's in it, there are some really funny little bits in it, which I don't necessarily think it needed to do, right? The whole, the jokes about him and her and that and back and forth. It almost becomes Ainley's trying to do high camp, and she's like playing like
she's playing straight.
She's Joan Collins and he's doing high camp, right? So it doesn't really work. Whereas if Ainley would have been the Castrovalva Master, and at this point, let's have the Master be the Master. So I think that it's a good story. I don't think it's great, but I do think that for me, Kate O'Mara just rocks. And I would not have brought her back later. I just would have let her out there to be there. But Pip and Jane Baker, also great new fresh voices for the show at a time when it needed that as well. So that's kind of my opinion of that one. But Kathryn, I wanted you to sort of chime in on the role of a strong female villain. And also, Peri does some really strong things in the story as well, too.
Actually using her science degree for botany to actually try to solve the problem. And the whole idea of, yes, she's supposed to be brilliant. The Rani is supposed to be a brilliant chemist. But the thing is, everything that we know about her is told by the Master. So we're getting his point of view. And she doesn't say anything. She doesn't refute it. She just basically goes ahead with her plan. And the whole idea, she's looking at the Doctor and the Master bickering like they're two kids. Go away. Leave me alone. Stop bothering me. I've got this plan. And it's not something that you look at and it's not a world-shattering or world-ending plan. It's just basically she's going to snip it back in time, grab some brain chemicals, and go back to her planet, come back, get some more. She's not trying to end the world. She's just basically I'll just sneak in and grab some chemicals and go away. The idea that she's a brilliant chemist and yet she's basically, she doesn't know enough to actually to make those chemicals on her own. Tells her she does have a weakness there.
Yeah.
The idea that she's going to be collecting Tyrannosaurus embryos, okay, that's interesting little hobby there. But the whole idea that she's got a working TARDIS, she's got all these booby traps set up, she plans way ahead of time. She is a really good villain.
And she's a great villain to play against Colin Baker if they just had Anthony Ainley not get in the goddamn way. Sorry. And Kate O'Mara is just, wow, she's fantastic, right? She chews up scenery, and her and Colin together, it's like, those were fantastic scenes with them together. And I like the fact we got to see another TARDIS, right? We've been waiting so long to see a different type of TARDIS. This one sort of, looked like it was the antithesis of the other TARDIS with colors, the color palette and things.
Yeah.
It was really interesting. So
different decorations there too.
Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting. Do you want to weigh in on Mark of the Ronnie, Chris?
I think it is a fun romp, as we've been saying. I think it's a story that could have fitted into any other season, as I think I might have already said. And yeah, Doctor Who, particularly 80s Doctor Who, does often work really quite well when it goes historical. And because the production team and like the costumers and everything know what they're needing to do, and and it just looks kind of sensible. Fantastic location work as well. As a kind of like as a rural life museum up in Shropshire. It looks good. It looks good. And okay, sure, you've got some silliness with the dinosaur and everything, but
the silliness of the tree.
Yes, silliness of the tree. But it hadn't occurred to me as to what it would be like without the Master in it. I mean, it is interesting because like they don't really make much of the fact that presumably Peri would have moderately traumatic memories of the Master, and I don't remember there being much made of that. But then again, they never made much of Nyssa, the fact that the Master was walking around wearing her father's corpse. The show does tend to kind of like forget these things. But yeah, it is such a shame that Kate O'Mara never faced off again against Colin Baker.
Because they were so good.
And also as well, Pip and Jane's writing. Like you don't have things like megabyte modems in here, so I think it might also, whether or not this was the fact that Eric Saywood was actually paying attention and script editing them, possibly, I don't know. It just works really well. And I am not particularly a Pip and Jane Baker fan, however, I do love this one.
So here's
other little things to add in there too.
Yeah.
The fact that they had actually, Pip and Jane Baker had read an article in Science about sleep centers, and that's where they got the whole idea to bring in.
Yeah.
The fact that Sarah Hellings was the last woman director in classic series.
Yeah.
So you had that aspect, and also having the Ronnie being the one who invented the Stattenheim remote control, which is also mentioned in the next episode. Nice little touch that, yes, she doesn't just do chemistry.
Yeah. So I do want to bring up a point with this one. Mark of the Ronnie, I think, is one of the most interesting, because this season, one of the things that they did that was interesting, they changed convention and the episodes were 45 minutes long. So instead of, it was still like the length of a 4-parter, but it was only 2 parts, which is still like just like, wait a minute, what? When I watch it, I have to kind of refocus, right? This one, I think, had the most kind of clunky episode ending of the season, because he's on the cart heading towards and that's it, and that's where they end it, right? The 45-minute episodes, yes or no? Where are we on these?
Well, nowadays we have the 45-minute episodes.
Yes, but in 1985,
this was the one season that was all 45-minute episodes.
Yeah.
So that took a little getting used to. And the fact that they actually had shortened the season to 13 episodes, but they were 45-minute episodes, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it threw the pitch.
It's Resurrection of the Daleks' fault. In fact, it's the Olympics' fault because the Olympics forced Resurrection of the Daleks to be done as 2 times 45-minute episodes, and they figured, oh, that's fine, it works. Sort of like, does it? So yeah, I don't I don't think because they haven't quite figured out how to structure the episodes. It really doesn't, and also because it does give Eric Saywood the opportunity to have the Doctor and Peri not so much in episode 1 of 2, and which just is such a weird way to approach things. You want to watch the Doctor kind of like get in the action, unless you have really strong kind of like supporting characters. Like, for example, we're going to go on to like Revelation of the Daleks. I think because the characters there are so interesting, I don't think I personally necessarily mind the fact that the Doctor is kind of like wandering around outside in the snow for a fair old while, because I'm interested into what Jocelyn's up to and all the others. But yeah,
I think
I
it
do
kind
think.
of. Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
45 minutes doesn't quite work, but it does also mean when the show comes back after the hiatus, then JNT can say, no, they've not reduced the amount of Doctor Who. It's the same number of episodes as we had last time.
Yeah.
That's true, but
Yeah, but I think it's what they did with it, the pacing. I think, and this is why I'm tying it back to Mark of the Ronnies, because I think if Mark of the Ronnie had been filmed with the conventional ways of ending stories that we were used to, they would have found better points to end it, right? The other interesting thing I do want to say, Mark of the Ronnie, it sort of continues this infuriating thing that drove me nuts with the Master. They projected it onto the Ronnie. We're like, sometimes the Master wears a costume when he has absolutely no reason to wear a disguise or a costume, i.e. time flight. Like, she's in a costume, although her costume's pretty convincing, and you know, it's the reveal is actually like amazing, but she didn't really need to, right? So they sort of put that onto her instead of him.
Well, would they have trusted her with a bathhouse looking the way she normally would look?
no.
Well, she could have done it with just, you know, how she wore her hair or something too, right? They didn't necessarily need to go the full-on costume, you know.
And the costume was so believable, nobody was believing it was her.
Yeah.
She wasn't even seated at some of the events because she was in costume.
But it was better when the Ronnie was revealed in costume. It was better than when the Master would do it, right? And I just like, why are we even doing that? Just don't put her in a costume at all. Just make it. You've done this for years. So let's jump into the 2 Doctors, sort of the elephant in the room, right? A couple things going. What's interesting is this story. This season, you only have 2 episodes that are really studio filming, which is Time Lash and
Revelation has quite a bit. Vengeance of Varos. Yeah. Oh, have we lost Rob?
I hope he comes back.
Yes. He did a very dramatic pose.
Right in the middle of a point.
Yes. Yeah, well, whilst we've temporarily lost Rob, maybe we do just talk about the 2 Doctors amongst ourselves.
Yes.
But yeah, because 2 Doctors is one that I encountered first in book format. And so Robert Holmes's novelization, and there's a foreword in which they say that he'd never written a novelization before, and this was the only one he ever did. And I think it was because it was the 100th target book, and so he was persuaded that it was a fantastic thing for him to do, and it was a great honor. And also because the 2 Doctors isn't celebrating an anniversary, so let's celebrate a target anniversary. But I remember being slightly disappointed when I eventually saw it. But I do like the fact that you get something from the 2 Doctors that sticks for quite some time, which is that the Doctor becomes vegetarian.
Yeah.
And he's vegetarian throughout the McCoy era. I think
I'm trying to remember.
I don't
They don't
remember
mention food that much.
Yeah, and like most of the food he does eat is fruit. It's one of the things that
And
does
candy.
slightly annoy me. So hands up, I'm a vegetarian. But it does slightly annoy me in the modern era. I think, but then I go like, well, people can go back and forth. It's fine,
Yeah.
I guess. So yeah, but it is this one bit of kind of like character development
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
sticks, and it comes from that story. It's
Yeah.
quite interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it
Anyway,
was kind of a take on
yeah.
British cooking shows of the day.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Oh, yes, yes, yeah, yeah. Kind of like Oz Clarke and co. Kind of like going around Provence or somewhere like that.
Mhm.
And in this case, Andrew Fear, which looks fabulous.
Yeah.
It
And
really
Holmes was a
does.
vegetarian too, so
He
bringing that in.
was.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, 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 yeah. But yeah. So, what are your thoughts?
I didn't quite understand why they had to have this projection of the second Doctor suffering.
Hmm.
I mean, yes, Jamie saw it, but why were they? Oh, that's right. It was supposed to be people were going to be coming, and they blamed the Time Lords for who destroyed the space station.
Yeah.
But that was really convoluted. Uh, and then having really tall Centaurans, because I mean, that was the first time the Centaurans are back after a long time.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, maybe they're from a different clone batch or something.
Yes. Yes, we can rationalize it later on, but I
Yes.
mean, back in those days, they still. I had my first VCR in 1981,
Hmm.
so people might have seen some of the earlier episodes and wondering why are the Centaurans so tall?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I do remember being shocked by the death of the British. I think was it British tourist or restaurant owner?
Yeah, he's both.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and where he just kind of like just gets kind of like stabbed through with a fork,
Mhm.
like like a pitchfork, and I remember thinking that felt a bit unnecessary.
Yeah.
Though I mean, yeah, shock
We
eye.
also had the Undergun being stabbed
Yes, yeah,
too, so
yeah.
and the
So I mean,
doctor.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know whether it necessarily needs three parts,
Yeah.
though.
But you
It,
actually had more time for Troughton, though.
yeah, yeah, because that's the thing that there's a bit. Oh, we're supposed to be in defense of, aren't we? But though also it's interesting. Rob introduced us as being the elephant in the room. I don't think it's the biggest elephant. I
No.
think I think I think the biggest elephant's coming up next.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think it's a shame that that quite a bit of the second Doctor's spell and the story he is changing
Mhm.
into the anagram, and that for
Yeah, it
me
didn't.
it is a bit sad. Is that it's not a great use of a Patrick Troughton.
Yeah, but on the other hand, when the side effects started hitting Colin, and he
Hmm.
started eyeing a cat and
Yeah,
thinking about how that's going to taste, like,
yeah,
oh wow, that's not something I predicted.
yeah, yeah. But it also does make you wonder, like, yeah, is are we also happening at the same time, like in Warriors of the Deep and The Awakening and all these various other stories in between? Are you
Yeah,
like,
how fast is that
yeah,
progressing through the
every
doctors?
time? Yes, yes, yeah. Yeah. Also, are there any bi-regenerated doctors now?
Oh dear,
Um,
at least we didn't have to worry about that back then.
no, 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 no. Or what Sutek was up to.
Yeah,
But yeah, yeah,
well,
I
it
think
was kind of weird because Jamie was being kind of creepy towards Perry. That time
yes,
period. Like he was always acting as an older brother to the other women that he was basically appearing with. It's like, I don't know.
does he
But of
act as an
course,
older
back in the
brother
80s, they
to
were still
Victoria?
doing the
Yeah, does he act as an older brother to Victoria?
uh
I don't know.
he did. He was basically trying to protect her most of the time.
Yeah, okay.
And it was basically more of the bickering with Zoe.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. But
So different stages of older brother,
yeah, okay,
but
fair
he
enough.
wasn't acting like an older brother with Perry.
No, no, no,
So that was a
no.
little bit. hmm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But again, they're doing more of the 80s time period, different mindsets. Like,
Yeah. Though also, once if we didn't have if we didn't have the two doctors, then we probably wouldn't have Jamie's return in the DWM comic strip at the time.
yeah,
Yeah, as written by Grant Morrison, which and I think it's called The World Shapers, and that is a fantastic story. I remember reading that as a child and just being stunned by it. Yeah, I think it. But I also, as well, I am very glad I was not a son. I wasn't an actor playing a Sontaran wandering around in southern Spain. That
yeah.
must have been uncomfortable.
Because they were really warm. And it's interesting to actually see the doctor walking around just his waistcoat rather
Yeah,
than the colorful jacket.
yeah, and he looks good.
Oh gosh, yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It really looks good for him.
Mhm.
So yeah, yeah, it's a shame that that it's that this yeah. It's a shame that the story isn't better. I think
Yeah,
really, and also it's
yeah.
a shame that the doctor doesn't keep that look because that would be so much better. Right, we have been told it's 19 minutes remaining.
Okay.
And so now that there are two of us, shall we move on to
To
Time Lash?
yes.
Yes. So Time Lash, as I've kind of like intimated earlier, I was given this as a birthday treat.
Oh,
Where we lived in the Middle East was a land that copyright forgot. And so there was a little video library store sort of very close to us that had videos that were basically recordings of British television and various other things that you could just hire out.
ooh.
And somebody had edited together Time Lash into a movie. They had done this in like 1986. I have no idea why someone went to that trouble to do this for Time Lash. But we just
Maybe it's the
rented
only
out.
one they had available.
Well, we rented out Doctor Who. We were not told what episode of Doctor Who it was.
Oh,
And so I got together a gaggle of mates and we very excitingly for my 8th birthday sat down to watch Time Lash. I think the others got quite bored and we decided to go off for a swim. But I loved it. It was my first exposure to Colin Baker. And also as well, it was my first exposure to, and I to yeah, Paul Darrow. I was struggling to
mhm.
remember his name for a second, and Paul Darrow is magnificent.
Yes.
And yeah, it is not a classic.
No.
However, I didn't realize until kind of like maybe 7 or 8 years later how hated it was. I do wonder whether part of the hate is because the hiatus happens
Mhm.
just before Time Lash starts. And so Doctor Who fans are kind of go, right, okay, well,
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
that's right.
hopefully this is going to be kind of like really, really good and show folks, oh no, we need Doctor Who to carry on. And then, yeah, a story that is not a classic comes
No.
on air.
But it does have a historical figure.
It does. It does. It does. It does. It has H.G. Wells. I think
We don't know
Hugo
it's
is
H.G. Wells
or
until the
her
very end of
yeah
the
or
episode.
Herbert rather. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think he's good fun. I think he's
Yes.
good fun. Yeah. I mean, not the best actor.
No.
But and there is a brilliant little so one of the actors in it, I forget her name now. She's one of the lead rebels.
Okay.
So she ended up marrying a duke and became a member of the royal family. Or maybe she was already, but certainly, and so she was being referred to as the Duchess by Colin Baker, and she was at I think she was at Princess Diana's wedding
Oh, wow.
as a guest, and she went on to pay bail for Julian Assange which didn't necessarily. I don't know if Julian Assange is a internationally known figure. He's very
Name
well
is
known in
vaguely
the UK.
familiar.
Sorry.
Name is vaguely familiar.
Name is vaguely familiar. Okay, yeah. So, yeah, WikiLeaks.
Okay.
And
Okay.
yes, that guy who was a bit of a course
Switch to
celeb.
real world. Right. Okay.
Yes, real world thing. Yes,
Okay.
real world thing. And so she paid his bail, and he repaid the favor by running off to the, I think it's to the Ecuadorian embassy and being there for many years
Mhm.
until comparatively recently. But yeah, so anyway. Lots of interesting things. Also, lots of tinsel in a time tunnel. But it's good fun, and you have that flaming android that suddenly appears out from nowhere, which I just found amazing. It was like, wow, what's that flaming android doing here? And also as well, Peri's wearing clothes,
Yeah.
recognizable clothes, and she
Yes.
gets to do a bit of botany.
Yeah. Again. Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
the things I liked about it was that, okay, yes, towards the end of the episode, we find out it's actually H.G. Wells, and you're going, oh, the time machines. That's why we've got these strange names like Morlocks
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
Borads and having the Borad end up in Loch Ness. Okay, that was an interesting way of getting rid of your villain.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
Writer Glenn McCoy is interviewed
Hmm.
in this, and he's talking about he wanted to put other doctors in it, and he met Pertwee before he started writing the script, so
Oh,
that he
okay.
got the idea of adding him in there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, he had a friend who sent in artwork for the Boread, which the JNT basically said, we don't get artwork, but we'll try this.
Hmm.
And he basically turned up for the filming and was just leaning on, and the set was darkened, and he was just leaning on something, and then finds out he was leaning on the console. He wasn't much of a watcher of Doctor Who, so that's why he added in the seatbelts and was wondering
Yeah.
why. So it's little odd bits that you find out from these interviews. How much do they know about the show before they start writing for it? This was only his third script that he'd ever written.
Yeah. I
So
think
that
it
kind of
shows.
explains some of that show.
Yes, yeah.
But he
Yeah.
doesn't really have any influence on why there's tinsel inside the time lash. So
No. But you'd also thought somebody might have said, look, we don't normally have seatbelts because like the seatbelts aren't really needed.
no.
And you kind of
And
think, well, why don't we have why hasn't they ever
the
had it again?
director or somebody could have sent something, but
Yeah. Yeah, but it's
no. And the thing is, because I've been watching Blake Seven, and they had Colin Baker on there, and he was chewing the scenery in the episode he was in. So the
yes.
idea is that Paul Darrell was acting the way he was because he was getting back at Colin
Yeah.
for the Blake Seven episode.
Yeah.
Which I can see this.
Yeah, which makes sense. Yeah. That Duchess figure was Tracy Louise Ward, who her official title now is Tracy, Duchess of Beaufort.
Oh, okay.
So,
not quite Boread, but okay.
No, not quite Borat. No. And her father was an honorary, so I think she was. Yeah, so she
was a duchess at that time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Her grandfather was an earl.
Okay.
Yeah.
That explains why Colin was referring to her as a duchess. Okay.
Yes. Yes, I can imagine that Colin probably would have had a bit of fun with that.
Yes.
But yeah, no, yeah, it's good. It's good.
And the other nice thing about it was because over in fandom, I recognized the artwork that they had for the Third Doctor.
Yes.
It was by a fan artist that had been in different shows there. It's like, that's her work. Oh my gosh.
Oh, that's so lovely. That's so lovely. But yeah, I mean, there are things that are weird. Like, for example, Peri seemingly been forced to look at pictures of former companions and go, "Oh, that's Joe Grant."
And when did she ever get to see pictures of these characters before?
But the great thing about Time Lash is it opens up so many possibilities for story. So you could have had Peri meeting Joe.
Yeah.
So and the various so Doctor Who novels have had various different takes on explanations about kind of like Carfell. We have Speed of Flight by Paul Leonard, which is happening whilst the Doctor is trying to take Mike and Joe to Carfell. And
Okay.
the TARDIS goes off somewhere else instead.
As it does.
And as it does, there's also as well a missing Lance Parkin novel that he and I think Johnny Morris wrote, and that the BBC decided not to publish. Called I think it's called Operation Bandrill, and features the Bandrills taking on Unit. And it explains how come, and then the Doctor and various others get to Carfell later on in the book, and that's why they kind of go, oh, you're traveling on your own, because according to that story, they reach Carfell with a whole host of Unit soldiers.
Oh my gosh, that explains that line. Okay.
Yes, it explains that line.
Cool.
Yeah. And Mark Durrani hasn't caused all of this. Vengeance Varos hasn't caused all of this. Time Lash has. Time Lash is a piece of genius. Right. Okay. Having made that, and Rob is not here to address the the elephant in the room. Let's go on to the season finale. Yes. Revelation. What do you think?
Having the idea of them being in suspended animation means you get to make jokes about death ceremonies and customs. The notes that I've read is that basically they've got that wonderful mourning cloaks that was beautiful blue because I think it was Eric Sayward was tired about the outfit and didn't want to see. He thought that having the Doctor's regular costume would be just not set the right tone, so he basically put them in blue.
Yeah. Have them blue the whole time.
It's a cool costume, and they're really nice cloaks.
Yeah. It's really lovely. I have a special fondness for Revelation of the Daleks because some of it was filmed at a place that I worked at. I worked for a while for IBM, and IBM North Harbour is where the exterior is. So kind of like where the Doctor is wandering around through the snow, and it wasn't supposed to be snow, it just happened to snow sort of like that week. And people sort of like the best part of 15 years afterwards at IBM were still kind of like saying that Doctor Who was filmed there, and they were quite proud of it. But certainly I don't recognize any of it. I go, oh yeah, no, that's definitely IBM North Harbour. It's good. It's quite funny. Is Revelation of the Daleks.
It's dark humor, but it's humorous.
Yeah. The first time I saw it was during the 30th anniversary, because BBC Two was repeating a story for each Doctor, and for Colin they chose this story. And I was gripped by it. They showed it in the 4-episode format, but I just thought it was really, really good. And it was it wasn't. I don't remember feeling it was nasty. I do remember though wondering why on earth they had Alexei Sale playing the DJ. So Alexei Sale was very well known in the UK as a comedian, and I think these days, okay, sure, we still have stunt casting in Doctor Who. However, these days I think a lot more comedians are able to act. I don't think Alexei Sale has acted in many other things since. So it's one of these things that kind of like that might snap a Brit out of it. So just kind of go, hang on, that's Alexei Sale. Just in the same way that when I was sitting down to watch Delta and the Bannermen, my mum went, that's Ken Dodd. And she'd already decided that she hated the Sylvester McCoy era. And this was like the final thing. Like, what on earth is Ken Dodd doing in this? So yeah, but and you have Eleanor Bron just being sort of like wonderfully kind of like cold and it's
And that whole
great.
idea behind Sullivan Green basically happening in this episode, and that's dark. Basically, people being harvested, both to either be Dalek or to be food point.
Yeah. And also like the fact that okay, sure, the Daleks are in the title, but they are more in the background.
Yeah.
Than most other stories, and I think that kind of works. I mean, as Big Finish and like the revival show has shown, you can have like the Daleks in the background of a story, and it could be perfectly fine. They don't need to be invading places.
But they are so much in the background that people keep forgetting that they levitate in this show.
Yes, indeed.
Not just the Sylvester McCoy episode.
No,
this one.
no. Yes, yeah. But yeah. So I think maybe we should get to a point where we start kind of like
winding up.
Yeah, season 22. Yeah. So yeah, I mean,
I don't know why it's so disliked because it's good acting, a lot of good costumes. I like the stories.
Yeah,
they are darker because that's the way the television industry was shifting that way.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think Nicola Bryant used to say that she didn't quite understand the criticism that the show got because, given it was up against the A-Team, which isn't exactly peaceful.
No.
But yeah, I think it certainly. I think it could have been possibly. It could have done with being a bit wittier at times and maybe possibly a bit more subtle. But I do think. It was. I mean, we've spoken previously about Maggie Thatcher. I mean, I think that Michael Grade would have probably put the show on hiatus anyway because of Warriors of the Deep, which he hated. Because the story is that he saw Warriors of the Deep and just went, "What on earth is this doing on my channel?" Particularly because he saw the Merker dripping everywhere, and
that's just poor.
Yeah, but why is the Merker dripping? The Merker is dripping because of Margaret Thatcher. Because Margaret Thatcher in 1983 called a general election slightly earlier than people had expected. And Warriors of the Deep was they were using the studio that was going to be used for the general election coverage. And they said, right, you have to film this now. And that is why you have a pantomime horse with paint that's not particularly set, because they needed to have the Merker. And so what happens to season 22 is down to Margaret Thatcher.
I'll still blame Michael Grade though.
Yes.
But still, it was
Yes. So
really good episode. So
yes, I have a Michael Grade story, if I may. I was lucky enough to be in the audience for one of the final things ever recorded in Television Centre as part of the BBC.
Wow.
And like there was just this call out on this kind of like ticket emailing thing that I was on at the time, a mailing list, and I went, "Oh yes, please." And so me and my wife went along, and it was presented by Michael Grade. And so you sat there in a studio. It's like I think it's the studio that Logopolis has filmed in. So I kind of know, hang on there, Tom Baker died over there. And then like and then somebody said, "Oh, and here's your host, Michael Grade." And I was like, "I am not clapping. I am not applauding you, sir. No. I am not applauding you." And I was there firmly with my arms crossed at the back. And Laura said, "Yeah, I'm sure you." My wife said, "Yeah, I'm sure your protest has been very loudly heard by him." But I did notice that as part of the celebration of all the various things, that they had a clip of Earthshock, and I could see him sitting underneath Earthshock, just kind of going, "Right, okay, when are we going to get this over and done with?" And I thought, we won. But yes, anyway, my Michael Grade story, nothing to do with season 22. But
what's your opinion of season 22?
I enjoyed. I think Yes, I preferred Big Finish's version of Colin, just because
Yes.
he is more relatable,
More relaxed.
yes, yeah. I mean, I don't think it is as bad as folks make
Yeah,
out.
because I
I
mean,
mean,
if you focus basically on the TARDIS crew, yes, they're arguing a lot,
yes,
and that was planned. It was supposed
yeah,
to be by the next season they were going to work together.
yeah,
Colin was going to get a better costume. There were
yeah,
so many things that could have happened that didn't
mm,
because
yeah,
throughout the work,
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
hiatus.
and you can dip in and out of this more than you can Trial of a Time Lord. So yeah, yeah,
There's
it's
good stories. There are good actors.
yeah,
Some really
yeah,
nice little continuity changers in there.
yeah, 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 and you have some excellent original villains. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's I mean, I wouldn't if someone is starting with classic Doctor Who, I wouldn't show them it. I mean, I don't think it's not an entry point.
No, it's not.
Um, but though, if they have a bit of a twisted sense of humor, I might show them Revelations and Alex.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Or
no,
Mark of the Rani because I
yeah,
still like her.
yeah. But there are certainly that. Yeah, it's better than you think. I prefer it to season 24.
Okay.
But that's yeah,
Yeah.
that's a matter of personal taste. But
Yes.
yeah,
But
no,
in
it's
defense of
good.
season 22, it's still good. There are
Yes, it's
many,
still
many good
good.
things part of it.
Yes, yeah. It's worth your time if you haven't if you've never seen it. And I appreciate sometimes folks at Console Room won't have seen necessarily that much of the classic era. Yeah,
Oh, I'm sure there's a lot of us at the console room.
do give it a try. Do give it
Yeah.
a try. But, anyway, right, okay. Well, I think I best let you get back into the warmth of your Minnesotan January.
So those of you
So
attending Council Room, please make sure to
yes,
stop down in the marketplace because there will be
yes,
some Doctor Who related books down there.
yes.
And
Please go and do that. I very much enjoyed my visits to the marketplace last year. But yes, you will not see me in person. However, I am on other panels virtually by the power of the interwebs. So on both Friday and Sunday. I can't remember what it is I'm talking about. I'm sure I'll be fascinating. Right. Okay.
yeah, be on panels in live in person.
Yes.
Well, welcome and hope you enjoy the rest of the convention.
Yes. Okay. Right. Ta-ra! Bye-bye.